working in space. So yeah, dealing with procedures. That's a fax machine on. I'm guessing that's possibly the shuttle, maybe. Yeah, so that's the cockpit of Atlantis. You see how little visibility they had. And that's pilots. So I've seen people saying that the real pilot for the shuttle is sat in a different compartment, and they have a blacked out window maybe below, because this is German astronaut Hans Schlegel does a handstand without touching the ground in the Space Lab in 1993. In the background, his colleague Bernard Harris is busy working on an experiment. You know, and you hear a lot of this, oh, we're doing science and working on experiments, but we don't see much practical evidence. So, I mean, he's got things attached to him, you know, probes and the like. And he's doing a handstand, so this is science, I guess. Is he monitoring the results of the handstand? Yeah, so this is interesting. Cosmonaut Sergei Avdeyev in Mir during a revealing experiment in 1995. Adhesive tapes were put in his body, which was then scanned by an infrared camera. The experiment provided a picture of body movements in zero gravity. Yeah, no other man was experienced in zero gravity as Sergei. So here's them possibly, you know, laying the foundations for their future filming work. So maybe, I mean, it looks a bit full, but you see, these zero-G planes, I mean, it's possible that they've got modules, a bit like shipping containers, that have got all this stuff in, that they can put into a parabolic plane and do some zero-G stuff inside one of these. So, you know, who knows, but perhaps this is them laying the groundwork for their future filming technology, a bit like George Lucas with Phantom Menace. And this is not, so this is, I mean, this book is 2005 and this was 1995. Cosmonaut working on his laptop in personal cabin on the ISS. Fine. Jerry cans filled with water on the ISS. The plastic cans are transported there and back on both the space shuttle and the Russian Progress cargo rocket. So these are quite, I mean, these are water jerry cans. I mean, they can't be packed and transported like that now. I've seen them where they have these bags full of water. Unless they're packing things around them. Aren't NASA designing their own jerry cans to fit into, you know, maybe square jerry cans to fit into, or square jerry cans with like one curved space so they can all fit into a capsule or something? But these are all round. I mean, what a nightmare. What a nightmare putting those onto the shuttle, into the Progress rocket, or even just having them on the ISS. Look at that. How is that designed for space? I think these are Russian. The Americans are using bags, which does seem a bit more sensible and plausible. It's back to this kind of thing. That's on the ISS. Checks plants in a rather modest conservatory. I mean, you're telling me, I mean, is that even a conservatory? Is that supposed to, what, I mean, is that it? And again, it's always the same with these experiments they seem to be doing. They just kind of, I just kind of throw them out there. I mean, is that, yeah, it's a sort of ish, similar-ish looking module. Is this a controlled experiment? Is it just, I mean, again, this is a pose for the camera. It's doing science. I'm checking the leaf. I mean, for what? Against what? Have you got any gauges, or are you measuring things? Have you got any control, or is it just, yeah, let's just do a bit of leaf, show that we can? Again, picture just doesn't make sense. You really think about it, they're on this space station. Why haven't they got one module that's like bathed in white with shelving racks, a hydroponics bay? What's that? I mean, really? Anyway, yeah, cosmonauts do a Pepsi commercial doing a spacewalk. So the cosmonauts are Pepsi and the astronauts are Coke, I guess. And yeah, this is Don Pettit looking down on the Canary Islands. So again, it's like, so that's from the ISS. So are they moving the ISS about that much? Because that doesn't look that high, does it? Right, so this is interesting. The star-spangled sky as seen from the space shuttle. Back on Earth, the scintillating of the stars is dimmed by the atmosphere. They sparkle with unhindered intensity in space. According to who? In this photograph you can also see part of the ISS. So this is part of the ISS. So here, you know, here's a star field from space. So but that's not what they say when they talk about it, the astronauts. A royal visitor comes to greet Belgian astronaut Frank de Win, who spent a week aboard the ISS on behalf of the European Space Agency. In this picture, which was taken shortly after his landing in Kazakhstan at the end of 2002, is congratulated by the Belgian Crown Prince Philip. So, like I say, Kazakhstan, they're in and out of that place all the time. Astronauts Robert Crippen, the cockpit is brightly lit by the glow generated by the enormous heat released through friction aboard the Space Shuttle orbiter. That looks like a weird type of helmet now. It doesn't say when it was. Astronaut Robert Crippen. We could find out when that was. Nice graphic there, but this helmet looks really odd. Not like the kind of twist-on helmet that they have on those on these things. Yeah, interesting. Shuttle landing. Again, this is a really posed photograph as well. Again, you know, these guys standing here, and probably went back on to come off for the camera. It's just photographer's instinct. You can just tell. There's often not something specific. It's just, yes. And just because that photo is staged, it doesn't mean NASA is all fake. But do you know? It's just, you know, just observation. After landing, Commander Frank Culbertson sprays the number 51, referring to STS-51 shuttle, on the concrete of the runway at Kennedy Space Center. Rituals and numbers. We know all about that. So you couldn't do that today, could you? Ride through Mexico City. Michael Collins, Edwin Aldrich and Neil Armstrong, several months before the historic mission to the moon. So this is 1969. wearing sombreros. You couldn't do that today. You'd be hung, drawn and quartered for cultural appropriation. Okay, yeah, so yeah, it's always, get the kids involved. Okay, so this is Apollo 11. Here we go. Yeah, so liftoff of the Apollo 11 launch vehicle. Was it all only a swindle after all? There you go. Lunatics. There is a group of people who claim with their eyes dry that the Apollo lunar missions of the period 1969 to 1972 were all faked and the result of conspiracy. According to them, they were all arranged on a secret military base or in movie studios somewhere in Hollywood. The American government just had to triumph over the Soviet Union during the Cold War, regardless of the financial consequences. It was only a successful moon landing that could demonstrate the technological superiority of the United States. The need to stay on top was so pressing that the government decided to deceive virtually everyone. The launches of the moon rockets were no doubt genuine, but the astronauts did not get any further than the Earth's orbit. Pictures that followed afterwards were produced in television studios. The moonstones which were brought back to Earth were manufactured in ceramic ovens on Earth. So NASA never knew precisely how to react to these claims. Of course, they were dismissed as ridiculous. But how should they be opposed and denied? Silence only further strengthens the conspiracy theory, because it looks as if the government is trying to keep something away from the people. And if you react to those claims, then you create the illusion that you take those lunatics seriously. Is there any reason at all to assume that the moon missions have never taken place? Supporters of the conspiracy theory base their claims mainly on thousands of photographs and videos that were taken over the course of the missions. They point mainly to the American flag, which was hung out during the first landing in July 1969. In the recordings, it can be clearly seen that the flag flaps as if there was a light breeze, but there is no air on the moon. Mistakes made by movie makers in a secret Hollywood studio claim the conspiracy theory supporters. Nonsense, the only possible answer. On one side, the flag had to be reinforced by an aluminium spring. Okay, and it goes on and on. Further on, the conspiracy theory supporters measured the length and direction of the shadows. So yeah, it's the flag. This claim is very easy to refute. The sun had a blinding effect. However, more doubts do exist. The lunar landing module would have to tip over by the movements of the astronauts inside. The astronauts would have to succumb to diseases caused by the cosmic radiation. And the best is that in 1967, NASA hired a hitman to terminate 3 astronauts because they intended to write a book on the Great Conspiracy. That is how it usually is with scandalous claims. The further back in history they are, the more absurd to the sober mind they become. Well, he hasn't refuted anything. He's given NASA's kind of, not even their take, but obviously their approach is difficult to gauge. But yeah, so that's it. It's just basically it's faith. You either believe or you don't. There's no, and he's even listed loads of other points that are perfectly valid, but he's not refuted them. He's just said they're absurd, but not given any backing as to why they're absurd. Again, it was always a trinity in those days. Then there you are. Is the trinity with the pyramid. That's the Apollo 1 astronauts. Ed White, Gus Grissom and Roger Chaffee. That's the Apollo 1 capsule. The heavily damaged Apollo 1 capsule after it burnt up during ground test. The 3 astronauts sitting inside at that time were all killed. An investigation showed that the capsule was designed and assembled with too much haste. And that's not a technical response, is it? The technical reason was too much haste. Well, it was apparently filled with oxygen. But anyway. And yeah, I mean, I haven't read the full text, but it probably doesn't say anything about them hanging a lemon on there. Here's the Challenger Again, if you get on the internet, yeah. So here's those weird helmets that don't have a seal. Weird. Yeah, people have found, I think, what, 6 of the 7 still alive today. Piece of Challenger. Challenger just about to go. And then there's Columbia. So this purports to be Israeli cosmonaut Ilan Ramon looks out of Columbia's porthole at the sun slowly rising above the horizon during his flight in February 2003. Ramon was killed during the re-entry together with 6 other crew members. Later on, fragments of Ramon's personal diary were found among other debris, including photographic film. It's amazing how they always find paper and film survives so much, and they want it to. 7 Space Shuttle Columbia astronauts, unaware of their fate that they were to meet on their return. This picture was found on Earth on a film lying among other debris. Just perfectly fine. Okay. Yeah. Space Center activity. Parts of Columbia forensically being gathered together. Challenger. Oh, here we go. This is my favourite one. A Future in Space. Here he is picking up rocks. And look at this machine. What's this machine doing? Look at those articulated arms. I mean, what are you expecting to do with those arms? I know this is just a painting, it's just a drawing. But they're not really properly articulated. I mean, they're not going to do anything. You pick rocks up, and where are you going to put it? There's no where's those samples going on this machine? So there's no thought in this. This is what I meant earlier about there's no real world engineering projects for them to focus on, so it's all fantasy. So this kind of stuff, and you know, kids and adults too will look at this stuff and will be like, hey, yeah, this is brilliant, wow, imagine driving that on the moon, I'd love that. Doing what? Is that all it has? Is that all it does? It's got a couple of grabbers. And what's that? Is that a camera to look at? The stuff it picks up? I don't know. You know, spend a lot of time on this rubbish. Future moon travellers stand on the edge of a valley as imagined by painter Pat Rawlings. Again. For the first time since the Apollo missions, a man-made object makes its descent to the moon's surface. As far as President Bush is concerned, the return of manned spacecraft to the moon is the main objective for Americans for the near future. Well, how's that working out for you, 10, 12, 15 years later? They've even made it look like the lunar lander with the gold and silver foil, you know. There'll be a technical reason why there's silver and why there's gold. It's ridiculous. What's this? Is this farming? This picture reveals the implementation of a moon-based project. Yeah, so this is what I mean about the NLP and the way you read this. And I'm not suggesting that people read this and think suddenly that this is real and happening on the moon at the moment, but they make it sound that this is almost like backed by blueprints and real engineering that is just ready to go if we can get it to the moon. You know, this picture reveals the implementation of a moon-based project. It doesn't. It's somebody's it's a fantasy painting. It's, you know, there's no description needed. Fantasy painting, fantasy painting. That's what it is. The living and working quarters are covered with a thick layer of moon dust to protect the inhabitants from space radiation. Ultraviolet radiation coming from the sun, as well as against substantial fluctuations in temperature. So what about the guys on the moon? I guess their time on there wasn't long enough to be affected. A large solar panel field on the right supplies the base with electricity. Electromagnetic cannon will be designed for sending containers of moon ground samples back to Earth. Holy moly. Really, will they? Living in a wheel. 1952, 5 years before the Soviet Union launched into space the world's first man-made satellite, Wernher von Braun, the father of the V2 rocket from the era of the World War II and later an important figure in the background of the Apollo lunar landings, cooperated on a series of articles in Collier's The Popular Science magazine on the future of people in space. Just look how they just apologise through the Nazi, you know. Wernher von Braun, the father of the V2 rocket from World War II and later an important figure in Apollo. Just Operation Paperclip, just hand waved through. It's fine, who cares? A gigantic space station was central in von Braun's plan. This wheel-shaped station, more than 225 feet in diameter, was supposed to provide housing for hundreds of people, and according to plans it would create artificial gravity by its own rotation. The crew would, just like laundry in a washing machine, be pressed to the outer wall of the station. They would not have to deal with zero gravity problems. A similar station would be orbiting the Earth as early as 1963, von Braun claimed. Later he changed it to 1967. But already sometime before his death in 1976, von Braun realised that reality was significantly more complicated than his imagination. After the moon landings, the will of the American government to spend billions of dollars on costly space projects vanished. So yeah, but you know, the dream lived on. A professor at Princeton University, O'Neill made plans of gigantic floating space cities. In the middle of the 90s, you know, it's all fantasy. I mean, they're talking about it like it's real engineering, like it's the background to how they built a skyscraper, and this guy and that guy, and he went bust before it was built, but he took it over. There's nothing to take over. They're not even plans. They talk about it plans like it's blueprints. It's nothing. It's just fancy. It's paintings. It's children drawing spaceships. What's this one? This picture shows a futuristic vision of a moon base as designed by NASA engineers. Wow. According to the designers, an inflatable module 48 feet in diameter would provide shelter for 12 astronauts. Hooray! But here you have got included in the plans a thick layer of moon dust to protect from space radiation, ultraviolet radiation, and substantial fluctuations in temperature. So where's your design into that? Is that covering it all? Is that covering the temperature fluctuations and the radiation? So why didn't they go in an inflatable pod to the moon? I mean, come to think of it, I mean, why didn't they? Just, they could have landed on the moon in an inflatable board. Well, whatever. Yeah. There's your solar panels. No, look, they're still... I mean, this is futuristic. This is massively futuristic. They've got a living pod, and there's these stupid things with the hooks on the front, picking up rocks. Because, of course, we're still taking samples and looking at rocks. And I still got these Apollo lunar type landers in it. It's crazy. What's this one? Hopefully people will not have to take so much a risk on Mars. A descent from a vertical rock wall in a valley. Painter Pat Rawlings can nonetheless very well picture situations of this kind. Well, sure. But you know, in the Middle Ages, they used to picture angels. And they had a whole canon agreed and arranged. Didn't make it any more real or true. So... according to Pat Rawlings, huge oxygen production facilities will be standing on the moon in the foreseeable future. They will be similar to this one, which stands between two solar panel fields. Oxygen is an important element in rocket fuel and can be later used for a journey to Mars. It's also crucial for people to breathe with. They're not supplying these people with... where's their water? Where's their water? What are they breathing? Where's their water? When they've breathed all the oxygen that's in there, where's their oxygen come from? And this guy, when he's saying, guys, I'm oxygen low, can I have some? No, that's for the rockets. Oh, guys, I'm gonna die out here, I need to breathe. It's bullshit engineering. Okay, this is a concept of a future moon vehicle with 2 astronauts exploring the surface. The painting was commissioned by NASA. Holy crap, this is the one that I was tearing apart so much before. I just, you know, this is for kids. The painting was commissioned by NASA. This was commissioned by NASA. What is it doing? This is a joke. This is for children. It's an entire engineering vehicle that picks up rocks. That is it. You're going to drive that out and pick up rocks with it. I mean, and what? And what are you going to do with that rock once you picked it up? You can't put it anywhere on or in this vehicle. It doesn't reach. It doesn't go anywhere. What, you're just going to come out and look at it? Holy, do you know? This is an imagined first settlement on Mars consisting of a landing module in the foreground and a vehicle for exploration of the surroundings. I mean, why bother? I mean, what kind of, I mean, somebody put this together in like 2 minutes. There's just like, this is like clip art. There's a clip art. They call that, that's a landing module. How the cripping that, it's one of those like water tanks you see in Nevada or whatever. It's like, that's landed. That came down and landed. And this, these clip art astronauts, how much effort do they put into this photo? Ridiculous. This picture offers a vision of 2 of the future Mars explorers standing by a jeep designed for exploration of areas around a virtual Mars base. What do you mean a virtual Mars base? Exploration of areas around a virtual Mars base. I don't understand that. But yeah, again, you know, it's another fantasy vehicle. What's it doing? Do we know? Yeah. Because he's got his eye watch, his Apple Watch. Looks like he's got a skateboard. This picture reveals a vision of an airplane flying through a canyon on Mars. Again, this is cheap as. It's a rendered background on Mars. How is it on Mars? They've just rendered a cheap as. And this, just what are you showing me? How is this? How is this space science? This is a 12-year-old has put this together. A 12-year-old would do better than this, actually. They'd have some imagination that, oh yeah, the pilot sits here, there's this, and it's doing that, and it's doing that. It's utter rubbish. It's just green steam. It's just taking up space. Just put anything on the page just to convince people that something is really is happening out there. Yep. Speak no evil, see no evil, hear no evil. Why has he got a different suit on? He's got a flap over those. Oh, so there's a chronology of space. These are the first. I mean, look at these. They look like they're going out on motorbikes. I mean, really? The stereotypical image of astronauts. Handsome, beefy men dressed in awkward spacesuits. The picture reveals the first group of American astronauts, the Mercury 7. They were introduced to the press and the general public in April '59. It was hoped they would catch up with the technological lead of the Soviet Union. The Mercury astronauts were constantly being outrun by their Soviet counterparts. Yeah, I mean, these spacesuits, they look like they're going out on motorbike. I mean, I don't think they didn't. The Mercury, I don't think they left. They didn't do any spacewalks, did they? I mean, you two are going to die if you do spacewalks in those boots, aren't you? I mean, they're just laced up. You're going to lose your feet to frostbite, I think, there, fellas. Just a single glass visor, you know, putting a lot of faith in those rubber seals there. Let's flip that visor down. Okay, Gus Grissom eating his breakfast. Okay. Oh, this is the after landing on Earth, astronauts of Apollo 11 have to spend 3 weeks in quarantine. The danger that they could have been contaminated while on the moon's surface was negligible, and soon it was proved so. Here wives of the astronauts standby window. Shortly afterwards they became part of an unprecedented media attention. So they spent 3 weeks in quarantine. And yet, if you look at videos on the internet, you can see the moments before they get into this, that they're just walking about with other people. Somebody else gets in there with them, actually. So maybe that was a doctor. Have a nice day, Charles Duke, before the acid generation even. The Mickey Mouse Apollo 17. This picture shows Skylab, which orbited Earth in the early 1970s. Skylab was partially assembled from redundant parts from Apollo. Astronaut Bill Pogue took this picture of his crewmates Jerry Carr and Ed Gibson on board Skylab. And this is a famous photograph from Skylab, because people have looked at it upside down. Krista McAuliffe receives instructions for wearing her helmet during training. This is the shuttle stuff, so instead of the red with the sealed helmet, it's just that. I mean, it's not even sealed, it's not finished and sealed to the suit at all. I don't get these helmets. They're obviously just flight helmets instead of space helmets. But it's the space shuttle, it's going up and docking. I don't know, whatever. There's the moon and Mars are seen from the International Space Station. And there you go, that's that book. The author, Mark Traa, is scientific editor of H.P. De Tige, The Time, and contributor of the daily paper Traa, Faith in Holland.